So today we're discussing capstone projects. My primary responsibility at MIT is probably twofold. The first is I work with our company hosts, our sponsor companies, to identify capstone opportunities. I do this in the summer. I'm very busy doing it now. I have a number of conversations with various corporations, companies, government entities, and I help them understand your capabilities, the student cohort. And then once we get the projects matched to the students in the Applied Business Analytics program teams, then I'll work with you to guide and mentor you through the process, which really runs from February to August. So what the capstone is all about, key bullet points, talking points. It is a core part of our curriculum. So a lot of the fall semester is focused on technical skills, machine learning, optimization, simulation. It's about knowing how to do various techniques. In this capstone opportunity that we offer through January, which we call IAP, the spring and the summer, it is all about executing and doing the work that you learned in the fall. And thus our program is very serious about knowing the techniques, also knowing how to apply them and work to get them implemented. We focus on real world analytics and data science problems for companies. So on there's a spectrum of problem statements that can range from research and development. You have an idea, you have a data set, you have a few data sets, maybe you join them, you analyze them in some way, and it could be potentially useful to an audience. That's research and development. We're more on the implementation side of things, or the actual execution side, which means we identify real problem statements that are of interest to our executive sponsors, either in year or in the quarter. Our companies actually want a product or a deliverable from the MIT students. We make sure what you're doing really is opportunity for use in a practical business environment. In the Applied Business Analytics program, you're never alone. Everything we do is in teams. And so our students team up. We have 2 students, and then they're supported and augmented with a faculty advisor, somebody with serious technical expertise to support the problem statement. And then, as I mentioned, I'll be meeting with the teams on a weekly basis to establish milestones and provide feedback on how you're doing against those milestones. This is a dynamic process, and it's something you'll learn in your optimization class, but specifically for 2024 as an example, we'll have, and it'll probably be very similar for 2025, but we'll have 40 projects and 40 student teams. And there will be popular projects, there will be less popular projects. Companies will like the skill sets of certain student teams. And as such, we do a very thorough matching process. We provide the companies the opportunity to come to MIT, and this is a great day. It's called Pitch Day, and we have 2 of them. It's the 3rd week of January this year. We go to the MIT Media Lab. The companies fly in. They do a 7 to 10 minute pitch in front of you, the cohort. And then there's a networking event, and then you'll have the opportunity to actually interview with about 10 companies so they can identify your unique skill set as a team, your capabilities, where you have areas to grow and improve. And both the student teams and the companies will enter a ranking. And we, because we're the Applied Business Analytics program, we feed those rankings into an algorithm, and that's our match. So we put a lot of effort and a lot of seriousness into our January matching process to ensure the best experience for both our students, but also the companies. And we make sure that the tasks covered go well beyond basic business analytics and get into a more advanced analytics realm, which includes ensuring there's definitely descriptive analytics, but also ensuring there's at least some predictive or prescriptive tasks. I work with the companies in the fall to make sure this is in scope. And then once you're handed the assignment, given the keys to start driving the project, at that point, you and the companies are free to navigate and rescope as required. Jen, any questions from the audience?
There's one question. How do students form teams for the capstone project?
That is an excellent question. And thank you for asking, Zoom user guest. We have learned over the years, this is probably year number 8, I think, Jen, year 8, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. What we've learned is, as a faculty, stay out of the process. And so the students get to know each other from August, our orientation, through a pretty intensive fall semester. And there are midterms, and then there's a weekend to go do a retreat, fall retreat. And the students get to know each other, and we provide guidance and coaching on how the students should match up. But generally speaking, as a faculty team, we leave it up to the students to identify the partner that they like to work with.
Great.
So in front of you is a select list of sponsors. Some of these names I would imagine you recognize. You see Coca-Cola Southwest Beverages. That is not Coca-Cola, the corporation. That is a bottler. But what they're focused on is getting Coca-Cola products out to retail shops around the state of Texas and Mexico. You see Nike, where one of our students last year had the privilege to work on their sneakers app. Airbnb, you might be a customer. This team last year got to work with Airbnb and to work on how to establish priorities for a complaint hotline or how to handle issues with the Airbnb service. Visa, probably recognize, it's one of the 2 largest credit card companies globally, and JP Morgan Chase might be, or JP Morgan might be another company that kind of sticks out here. Additionally, you might see companies that you don't recognize. Maybe Zoetis is a veterinarian pharmaceutical company, so they make pharmaceutical products for pets and animals. MFS is a well-seasoned capstone sponsor, very good relationship with MFS. They've been with us from the beginning. They're in the business of advising wealth managers. They're not quite the consumer world. They support businesses, so they're B2B. Wellmark Blue Cross Blue Shield is a healthcare insurance underwriter. Takeda is a pharmaceutical company. Handle is a scale up, so they're beyond the startup phase, but they focus on hospital and supply chain management. So key message on this page is we often work with big global companies. We also work with smaller startups or companies that are less prominent in industry. We pride ourselves on being able to be useful in terms of what our students are able to deliver to companies across industries, but also across the various functions that you'll find within a corporation, like marketing and sales, operations, corporate finance.
Oh, I have a couple questions related to the projects, the topics. Is it okay to interrupt?
Absolutely.
How have the themes of the projects evolved or changed over the years, and what seems to be the main focus today?
That is a great question. And it's one that I seek to answer every year. So I just published a MIT Sloan Ideas That Matter article where I try to capture all the themes from the previous year. And I plan to do this every year so I can kind of give a pulse check out to the world on what our students are doing at the Applied Business Analytics program. Technology moves fast these days, very fast. There's limited generative AI interest last fall of 22. Limited interest in large language models, and then with ChatGPT that fundamentally changed the views on what our companies are interested in. So the pace of change moves quickly, and we are quite adaptive to it in the way that we, on an annual basis, interact with our companies. So the process is baked where we move at the pace of the large and broader economy. And specifically what that means, if we go back 7 or 8 years when we started, we used to essentially lay out a problem statement. We would ask for a data set. a SQL query would be run by the company. They would send the data over to the students. The students would analyze it in R or Python. They would then put a poster together and a paper, and that was the work. Fast forward 7 or 8 years, now our students generally are provided credentials to our host company's cloud systems of record. So they get credentialed in, they get laptops. They aren't given a data set from a SQL query, but rather they have the ability to almost crawl and swim through our host company data. With respect to what this means to the outcome, our outcome at our program remains the same. We remain very focused on business impact. We're seeking to improve revenue costs and risk profiles of our companies. So whereas the data sets and the availability of data and the magnitude, the volume, the veracity of the data analyzed by the students has changed fundamentally, the end user problem statements of improving marketing and sales, reducing costs and operations remain very similar.
Perfect. Another question about, the type of industries represented and why there's less big tech represented today.
That is an outstanding question. We are always in dialogue with the large tech companies. As an example, we had been in active discussions with Airbnb for 5 years. Large tech companies do, in our experience, we have come across a NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and data sharing issues with the large tech companies.
Mm-hmm.
Our requirement is that our students have access to data, company data. It can be sensitive. We make sure there's a strong NDA in place, and the companies, both the companies and MIT, are protected. And for that reason, we don't have as robust as a tech portfolio. That said, on the flip side of that, every company you see in front of you, students have real live data to, and they're able to access that data and actually work on a problem statement that is live, real, and very important to these companies.
Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to go through a few more
Yeah,
slides?
no, I would much rather answer questions.
What percentage of capstone projects change yearly? And what can we expect for this coming year?
So our retention rate, which is a very important metric to me, because if we have high retention, it's easier to then go get new. I've left companies to go get every year, and I actually do a whole class on retention and how we think about the business implications of the work that we do with a cohort. And I do that in January during IAP. And so if you join us, you'll kind of see behind the curtain on the work that myself and one of my colleagues, Erica, do in the fall. About 70% of the companies retain with us year over year. And so you can expect about 12 companies to move out and 12 companies to move in of our group of 40.
Awesome. Question about some of the capstone partners that are international. For example, BMW. Does this mean that students have the chance to work on site and or at other international locations, or are students doing everything here in Cambridge?
Great question. So before COVID, we were 100% on site. During COVID, we obviously were 0% on site. And since then, it has been a balance. And so during January, the companies will come and pitch, and in their pitch, they state their preference. And what we found is, I would say the majority of students stay in Boston and Cambridge for the summer, and then they'll spend 2 to 4 weeks on site with their companies. The BMW students will usually make a 2 to 3 week trip to Germany, and it's always a highlight for them. So key message, it is negotiable, it is an active discussion, and it is a dialogue between the host companies and the student preferences.
A couple of questions here. Do students get to know the theme of the projects as they interview with the companies? So maybe you could just talk a little bit about like the pitches that the companies make prior at the beginning.
Yeah, and so let me go to this page. No need to read this, but what you see is a one-liner. for companies. So Accenture, you see Innovate GPT, LLMs to measure innovation and application to the life sciences. You see McKinsey and Company, personalized engagement, the art of reconnecting with email subscribers. So the way this works, I'm going to go back a page, is that in the fall, I ask you not to think about Capstone other than finding a partner. We want you focused on your hard work, your coursework, and then we'll do some initial resume work and job searching. However, in January, we then start pretty strong focus on Capstone. The first school day of the year, I will introduce all 40 projects to the cohort, and I will do a 1-sentence explanation, maybe about 60 seconds per project, so that the cohort is organized to the problem statements of the 40 companies. I also field questions so that you don't need to ask the questions in front of the companies. Then 2 weeks later, the companies come and pitch, and they'll do about a 7-minute presentation to you where you're the primary audience, and they will tell you all about their project, where you're going to do the work, what's exciting about their company, why you should work with them. And then we have about 2 hours of networking where you can go meet with the companies, ask them specific questions. And then after that, you'll do a 30-minute interview with the company where you can discuss the project further. So we feel pretty good that whereas in December, you won't know much. In January, we'll get you up to speed very quickly so that you can make your best call on which project you would like to work on, or which projects you'd like to work on.
Perfect. Do you anticipate any projects that would be more focused on financial companies?
Yes, if it's a financial company, if it's Liberty Mutual, if it's JP Morgan, if it's one of our many insurance companies, like Banyan is an insurance startup, you'll be finance focused. So it's all a matter of identifying the companies in the industry that you want to support.
Can you talk about an example of a capstone project, capstone project's work that actually got implemented by the company?
Yes. So I'm just looking at the screen. CVS almost has like 100% implementation rate. Sometimes I actually see it. So CVS is one of 2 or 3 large healthcare retail companies in the United States. So they run a large number of pharmacies. I think the number is about 10,000 pharmacies. And as a customer, you'll get text messages from the pharmacy saying your product is ready or not. We had a team working on analyzing the responses in those text messages, and I'm pretty sure, like I saw that the text messages change as the underlying code was modified. Airbnb, the work certainly went into production. Airbnb about a year ago had an issue with customer complaints about service, thus they dialed that project up. I would say that 50% of projects at this point go into implementation. If that's not code being dropped in, it's at least an executive level dashboard that gets used. Okay,
nice. All right, keep going. There's some more questions, but we can.
Okay. So timeline I covered briefly. As I said, fall is all about your academic work. January is called IEP at MIT. It's a special time to focus on non-traditional topics. We focus on interviews and matching. In the spring semester, you will be expected to support your companies at about 10 to 12 hours per week. So you're part-time. You'll be on campus. You'll be taking your electives. You'll meet with me weekly. I will lay out milestones for how to get the project going, how to position you to best drive and deliver against your project. We move at a very slow pace because we are aiming to make sure that the cohort moves in unison towards the objectives, but also we want to make sure that the best practices and the methods that we teach, you have time to think about it and make sure that they're going to work and serve you in your future careers. And then summertime, you are expected to be at 40 hours per week full-time for at least 10 weeks of the 12. And you'll graduate in August after our capstone showcase. One capstone showcase. So you'll come back in August to present your work. Students produce a report, a poster, a video. It's a really fun event where the companies come back too. Our two winners this year were one from Accenture and one from the Takeda pharmaceutical company. And Jen, that's the presentation.
Okay, there's more questions.
Yep.
All right, so let me go back up here, scroll up. Can you talk about students who might be getting job offers from some of the capstone projects that they do?
Yep. So generally speaking, about 30% of our students go to capstone companies. We're very proud of that number. There is a clear ramp from the capstone project, or oftentimes a ramp from capstone to being hired. Some companies like Pfizer and Takeda, they hire, and then that hired student sponsors the capstone the following year. It's a pretty excellent virtuous cycle. Through your capstone process, my colleague Tracy Wishon will discuss how to prepare for that discussion of an offer and how to navigate it cleanly if maybe you aren't interested in the company and you're looking elsewhere, and how to keep your options open. So number one, 30% of our student cohort goes to capstone companies. We're proud of that number. Number two, we will be providing you tips, tricks, and guidance on how to navigate those discussions as you work through the capstone experience.
Okay. How intensive / competitive would you say the matching process is to some companies? This person assumes it would be more preferable to work with a well-known companies.
So yes, there is a preference for well-known companies. Often have a preference. That said, this whole experience is about networking. It's about thinking through your career aspirations. It's about thinking about what you want to do at MIT. So maybe your goal is to work at a large company. This is an opportunity to work with a startup. Vice versa, maybe you want to be at a startup. This is an opportunity to work in the corporate environment while you're an MIT student. Maybe you know you're going to go into financial services, so this is an opportunity to not do financial services. It is all about what you want to take out of the experience, you and your partner. There is competition for certain companies. That said, none of these companies will make it in front of you. They will not make it through our pipeline unless they have something compelling. And that's my mandate, to ensure that everything presented to you is worth doing. I can support that. Sometimes a company might seem less interesting, or a project. So we had a project last year dedicated to insurance paperwork that I thought was a really interesting and amazing problem statement. It was, because it involved both computer vision and also the use of large language models to keep a business unit thriving, which was financially at risk. So yes, there's competition. It is healthy and good competition. We don't let things get unnecessarily complex and pressurized. And all of the projects are worthy of doing, otherwise you won't see them.
All right. Maybe you could go back to the slide that talks about the timeline for the project to answer this one. So the question is, what kind of oversight or what type of work can the student expect with a capstone during the spring semester before they get to that 10-week full-time experience?
Yeah, so one of our key value propositions that I believe is quite encouraging to our host companies is that when the students show up in June, they're sprinting. They know the business language, they know the business data, they know the business problem statement, and thus what the springtime is about is really kind of two main goals for me, minimum must-have goals. One is understand the company and the problem statement and the business objectives, and then number two is make sure that there's clear proof of outstanding exploratory data analysis. So there's a very limited expectations the students start modeling and doing advanced analytics in the spring, but rather I and my colleagues who teach the course really focus on ensuring the students can present the problem statement, can show data, can show univariate analysis to prove that they understand the world they're in and they're positioned to walk into that company in the summer with a well-scoped problem and drive it to completion. So bottom line, the spring is a great time to slowly make sure everything is in order for a full sprint summertime evolution.
Okay. This question is about the different industries represented within the, there's two questions related to this within the portfolio of Capstone partners. So the question is, many Capstone projects seem to be in finance, marketing, or operations. Do you expect, or are there any companies with more of a focus on sustainability?
Yes. So, I'm thinking of our recent sustainability projects. We often, because of our business focus, because we're at the Sloan School, we're often very much marketing, sales, and operations focused. We're answering questions for how should sales reps use analytics to improve their performance. We're answering questions of how to run an optimization engine to support inventory analysis or routing. We have certainly had sustainability projects. As an example, I'm looking at this page, Visa was very much focused on small and medium-sized business growth within the United States. That was a question about how to leverage data to invest in areas that are maybe underserved. Takeda focused on how to leverage artificial intelligence to predict adverse effects of pharmaceutical products. So the sustainability ideas and problem statements, they do exist, and we usually have a couple, but the majority of our work is often focused on marketing, sales, and operations and profitability.
Okay. Another question related to the industries represented. They say, in the past, when they've referenced the Capstone project list, they've seen more partners in the aviation-related industry. Do we anticipate any more partners coming on board in aviation?
Yeah, I love that. So in the spring of 2020, we had Air Canada as a company sponsor, and they sent notification that they were going to drop out for obvious reason, because in the spring and summer of 2020, the aviation industry took a serious correction. But a little bit behind the scenes, behind the curtain, when I go solicit projects and I call companies, I look for growth industries, and travel, transportation, hospitality are growing again after a rough couple of years. So I actually did reach out to a couple hospitality and travel companies. I'm currently in an active discussion with Emirates Airlines. But that's just an initial discussion. So to answer your question, yes, I'm looking. If you have any ideas or any contacts in the aviation industry, please pass them along, and I'm happy to have a discussion. But bottom line is we go where the growth is, and right now aviation is recovering, and so yes, we're seeking to bring aviation back into the portfolio.
I think you touched on this a little bit already, but just to re-emphasize it, could you talk a bit more about the guidance or oversight the Capstone teams are receiving from us from the faculty or from the support in place from the program side?
Yep. So I'm going to answer this very discreetly and then step back. In front of you for the spring and the summer, I have 5 milestones that the students do. Milestone 1 is a project charter. Milestone 2 is a 5-minute presentation to your classmates and the faculty on your exploratory data analysis. Milestone 3 is due in May. That is an updated project charter. Milestone 4 is a midsummer presentation where you present to all of your colleagues in a virtual environment. Milestone 5 is a Capstone showcase where you provide a poster, a video, a presentation, and a 30-page report. All 5 of these milestones are very clear with very clear guidance and templates. I often seek to bring in previous year students so they can guide and coach you through it. And then we have me, the TA, and usually one of my colleagues who will grade your work and provide you feedback. If teams are falling behind or struggling, that's where I spend the majority of my time. And I work with teams one-on-one to ensure that they're able to recover and be in a position to deliver what they need to do.
All right. There's a request to go back to the slide that lists all of the capstone companies and the problem statements. And then is there any case, I don't think this is, there is, but is there any case where the company wanted to extend the length of the project period?
So the answer is yes, and there's two flavors of it. One is some companies will do a project and then ask the next year's project team to like enhance and build on it. Coca-Cola Southwest Beverage is one of them, and enhancing sales and efficiency with customer suggested ordering. So that recommendation engine of a sales agent going to a retail shop was built on like the previous 2 years of capstone experience. The second flavor is if the work isn't quite done and the company's very excited, they have offered consulting opportunities, short-term contract work for the students to finish off the work. I guess there's a third flavor, which is the company turns the work over to a manager who then picks it up and runs with it. I've attended those meetings to watch the students turn it over. It's always exciting. So we focus on real world problem statements that are of interest to our executive sponsors, and thus the work often does continue in various flavors, and that can mean that the kind of short-term contract work or potentially being hired to work through it.
All right. We've kind of exhausted the question list here. And we got one more. How are the winning projects of the year determined? What's the criteria MIT uses to assess the level of success for each?
Okay, great question. So first, everybody graduates. So I have my success metric to graduate you. I take that back. We have, yes, everybody's graduated capstone. So that's the bar to graduate. We do the capstone showcase, and there's voting. And we take the top 10 teams at the showcase and their poster presentations. And those 10 teams give a 10-minute presentation to our broad audience. And from there, the faculty determines who the best 1 or 2 teams from those 10 presentations are.
All right. Seeing the huge growth of AI tools, how is MIT working on bringing in more sponsors that focus on these tools in changing industries?
It's a great question. I would say that we remain very focused on the implementation and the use of the tools. We remain focused on identifying problem statements that serve profit and loss leaders. So we encourage the use of anything the students have access to. ChatGPT is a great tool for our students. There are obviously guardrails around this that, for example, you can't take a company's data set and upload it to ChatGPT. That would violate the non-disclosure. But we are very much in the world of giving our student cohort and our student teams the space to identify how to match the problem statement from the executive sponsors to the existing new tools on the market.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we're good. We answered all the questions in the chat. Great job. Any closing thoughts, pieces of advice you'd like to offer so that people here think about applying?
Yeah. So I did a similar project when I was a master's student at MIT. You will never forget the experience, both the ups and the downs. By design, these are hard problem statements, and whereas a homework problem set, you can attend a lecture, you can read the textbook, you can do the work, and you can get 100% and feel good about yourself. That doesn't happen in the real world. And that's why we have the capstone environment, where you're going to have ups, and then maybe you're going to have some downs and meet some obstacles, and you're going to be supported by your classmate partner. You're going to be supported by your faculty advisor. You're going to be supported by me, and no one project is the same. So you get your first kind of foray into the advanced analytics world in what I think is a very fun, engaging, and stable environment to take the good and double down on and stick with it, and take the bad and figure out how to avoid it in the future, in your future career. So we're all about real world application, and we support it with this program.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We have lots of people expressing their thanks. It was incredibly insightful, great to give applicants a sense of what it's like to be a part of the Capstone Project and the guidance and support that the program provides to help them succeed. So, thanks everyone for joining us today. We'll look forward to learning a bit more about you as you go through the application process.